Hi, everyone. This is Lindsay Nichols, GuideStar Senior Director of Marketing and Communications, and I am pleased to welcome you to GuideStar's first Impact Call of 2015. Today, we're going to spend some time focusing on GuideStar's theory of change, as well as reporting our 2014 programmatic and financial results, and we'll give you a sneak peek of our long-term goals for this year. As always, we're going to spend a little time on the lessons we learned along the way, and we're going to spend half of our time today answering as many questions from you as we can. We're thrilled to see that many of you on the call today joined us during one or more of the 4 Impact Calls we hosted last year, so thanks once again for joining us. For those first-timers, welcome. To give you a little context, GuideStar's Impact Calls are our attempt to evolve the definition of transparency and get you our results in a more timely and comprehensive manner. We also really want this to be interactive, so we hope you'll have lots of questions for us. Before I introduce our speakers, I just want to run through a few housekeeping items. First, we're live tweeting during today's presentation using the hashtag GFImpactCall, so we hope you can join our conversation on Twitter. Secondly, please ask questions. We're going to take them at the end of the presentation. You can submit questions via Twitter or using the chat box in WebEx. And finally, we will send all of you an email with today's PowerPoint and a recording of this live presentation in a few days. And you can find recordings of all of our Impact Calls at npo.gf/webinararchivesgf. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Jacob Harold, GuideStar's President and CEO. After Jacob speaks, we'll hear from Ms. Kusairi, our Vice President of Strategy, and James Blum, GuideStar's CFO. Jacob, it's all yours.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Lindsay, and thank you everyone for joining. We have more than 1,000 registrants for today's call, which we find very gratifying. We really appreciate that people care about GuideStar and our evolution, and we're just very thankful to have you join us today. I'm calling you from San Francisco, where I'm here with Lindsay, as well as with Ms. Kusairi, our VP of Strategy. Also in the room, we have Evan Paul, our Vice President of Products. And James is calling in from our Washington, D.C. office, and he'll be talking about our finances later in the call. So we're going to start out today talking a bit about GuideStar's theory of change, the framework that we use to tie the things that we do to the impact we want to create in the world. And we've been tweaking this theory of change over time to try and be clearer and clearer about that linkage. So we wanted to share with you that evolution. And then Ms. will show you how that maps to the metrics we track to understand if we're making progress towards our long-term goals. So it all starts with impact. And really every theory of change should start with impact. But because GuideStar is operating at the level of the broader nonprofit sector, we're talking about not just our impact, but the impact of every nonprofit in the field. And when we think about what drives that impact, we think about 4 components. So the first one is the quantity of giving. How much philanthropic giving is there in the broader field? You know, it's more than $300 billion a year, but that's obviously a key driver to the amount of impact that we can create in the field. The second element is the quality of that giving. Is it allocated in a way that helps to maximize the good that can be created with a dollar that's donated? The third piece is around efficiency. Are we able to get money and resources out to the organizations and then eventually the people they serve in an efficient way? Or do we have a sector where there's a lot of waste and unnecessary duplication and redundancy? And then finally is effectiveness. How do we take those resources once they're allocated and ensure that they actually create good in the world? And these 4 elements add up to impact in our mind, and they relate to a kind of combination of these 2 players in the field, donors and nonprofits. Obviously, there are many other very important constituents in the work of nonprofits. But when it comes to that fundamental equation, this is how we think about the elements of impact. Then there are a lot of things that drive these four pieces, whether that's trust in the nonprofit sector or a supportive policy environment that helps to encourage greater giving. And then the quality of the decisions made by donors is, at least in significant part, driven by the amount of data that they have access to. Efficiency is a product of many different drivers, but an important one is how simple and clear are fundraising systems. And then effectiveness is also driven by many factors, but two that we think are especially important are collaboration among nonprofits and then feedback loops for fast learning. So this light blue row here indicates a set of things that help to drive these fundamental factors. And then at the top, we see three pieces where we at GuideStar can really help to drive good in the work of nonprofits. That we have broad and deep information about nonprofits. So broad in the sense that it's about many nonprofits, and deep in the sense that it refers to the many aspects of nonprofits' work. Data systems that are interconnected so that they can be more efficient, comprehensive, and then new mechanisms to learn and provide feedback so that we can all be better. And then we see these three elements as mapping to the three pillars of our strategic plan: the collection of data, the distribution of data, and then innovation that builds on top of that data. So you see here, as you move from the top to the bottom, the basic logic behind everything that we do that helps us try and make good decisions about how we spend our time, our money, our resources as we move forward. So let me talk about these three pieces here: data collection, distribution, and innovation, and some of the projects we've been working on. So first, with data collection, as you all know, the bulk of our data historically has come from the IRS Form 990, but we are constantly trying to supplement that with other sources of data, and most notably through the GuideStar Exchange, a mechanism through which nonprofits can share data with us directly. And as we've discussed in past calls, soon we will be launching a new tool to collect quantitative programmatic information. So we collect quantitative financial information, which is to say numbers about a nonprofit's finances, and we collect qualitative programmatic information, which is to say sentences about nonprofits' programs. But our next step is to collect quantitative programmatic data, so that's numbers about nonprofits' programs. And we've also listed some of our partners at the bottom who've helped us as we think about collecting other kinds of data. So with Independent Sector and the Better Business Bureau-wide Giving Alliance, the 5 charting impact questions that make up the gold level of the GuideStar Exchange. With BoardSource, a set of questions about nonprofit governance. And then our partnership with D5, the Diversity and Philanthropy Coalition, to create a new mechanism for gathering data about the demographics of nonprofits, staff, boards, and volunteers. With data distribution, historically our most important distribution mechanism has been GuideStar.org, which we are in the midst of redesigning, as many of you have seen. You see here a first of many steps as we redesign the experience for our users on GuideStar.org. Last year, we launched a set of APIs, which are a mechanism that allows our data to show up on other organizations' platforms or websites. And then the Simplify partnership that we've had with the Technology Affinity Group to have our data show up in the software programs that foundations use to manage grant applications, known as grants management software, so that our data is auto-populating in the interfaces that foundations use. And then thirdly, data innovation, these new mechanisms for feedback and learning. You're experiencing one right now. The impact calls are a mechanism to help share what we're doing at GuideStar with a broader field, but also for us to get feedback from you so that we can continue to constantly evolve our work and make it better. And then a whole set of other projects from our expert survey tool, Philanthropedia, the new foundation membership program that we launched last year that helps foundations be a part of a network of philanthropic institutions that support GuideStar and engage with us at deep level. Some of our tools like the Nonprofit Compensation Report and Financial Scan, our campaign to move beyond the myth that overhead is a proxy for nonprofit performance. And in the bottom left-hand corner, a partnership with the Gates Foundation and an organization called Intentional Futures and Intuit to think through how our data, along with other kinds of data, can help to inform smart donor decisions and engage with the products of a company like Intuit. And we're hoping to have other projects like that with many other innovative companies. And all of this rests on our ability as an organization to step up the quality of our work. see here on the left a photo of our staff spread across 3 offices across the country, plus some remote workers, and a terrific team, some of which have been with the organization for 20 years and some who are brand new and everything in between. And, a remarkable team that continues to get better. It's really been helped over the last year by the implementation of a whole set of new software tools to help us track our own work, engage with our customers, partners, users, and to visualize how people are using our tools. And one tool I thought I would take a moment to show you right here is something that was created by our head of design, Sarah Madden. This is a visualization of our goals for 2014 and how they, in a sense, manifest the connections among our staff. So you'll see here the diagram, the circular diagram on the right-hand side here, is a network map of all GuideStar staff, and it shows how they're connected to each other through the work that they do. The work that they do is represented on the left-hand side here, where each of these 5 buckets represents a key area of focus for us in 2014. And then within it, you can see how teams within GuideStar work together on certain projects. The colors here represent, you can see here just below, the various offices that we have across the country. And to us, it's a powerful representation of how we work together as a team within GuideStar in 2014 and continue to do so in 2015. But more than that, it's also a representation of the power of graphic design and data visualization to tell a much richer story about how people work together to get things done. And it's something that we as a field have a lot of work to do to really capture this potential, and it's something that we're really excited about. So returning to the presentation, you can see that we're pretty excited about where we're at. And with that, I'm now going to hand it over to our Vice President of Strategy, Ms. Kusairi, to talk in a bit more detail about what does it mean to talk about where we're at. Let's actually put some numbers behind that, and that's exactly what Ms. is going to do.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacob. I'm excited to be speaking with you today. For those of you who are on our first impact call, we first introduced 2 dashboards that we operate and use at GuideStar. One is our impact dashboard, which you've seen on this impact call, and this is our communication tool for external stakeholders and looking at how we're monitoring our strategy. We also have an internal tool that we use called our organizational dashboard, and this measures the internal health and strength of GuideStar as an organization. So as Jacob mentioned, he talked a lot about our strategies for impact, the way that we think about how we measure our impact. The work that GuideStar does is very complex, intertwined with other players in the field, and so we're always open to improving and iterating on how we measure our performance. So the information that I'll be presenting to you today will be a reorganized frame of how we think about our impact. And I'll also talk at the end about some new metrics that we're planning to add and some work in progress that I'll share with you. Great. So on data collection, Jacob mentioned that, GuideStar Exchange is one of our important data collection tools to supplement the information that we get from the IRS from the 990 form. We think about, the growth that we have had across the different participation levels. Now, from bronze, silver, and gold, this is the level of information that nonprofits provide to us. We look at the growth has been very consistent quarter on quarter. As you will recall, in June 2013 is when we first relaunched GuideStar Exchange. So since then, the growth has been rather consistent. The silver level has seen a slight decrease, but that's really an indication that organizations have moved up from silver to gold. The overall total here that you'll see of 41,000 is a little bit different than what you might have seen in the past. We're taking a more conservative way of measuring total participation, and we've excluded organizations that are in progress but have not yet fully completed even the bronze level of participation. An interesting measure, or that we've seen progress on, Jacob mentioned the diversity initiative. We launched a new demographics page in October, and since then, over 800 organizations have shared information with GuideStar, so we're very excited at the progress, even in such a short period of time. Next slide, please. On data distribution, the two main channels that Jacob mentioned and talked about is our unique users. So these are the number of people that come to GuideStar's website. The growth similarly has been steady, and what we realized in collecting this number is that the team is very much focused on the quality of the visits. Our products team is very focused. It has focused in the fourth quarter on mobile responsiveness, and so we might look at adding some measures of quality of our performance over the next couple months, and looking at potentially bounce rate or time on GuideStar.org to more accurately reflect the work that we're doing and the drivers that we're striving for. The next one is GuideStar data channels. We think about this as organizations that are using our data on their sites. This helps increase the reach of GuideStar's work, and this is very much a new concept for us. You'll see that in Q4 2013, as soon as that, we didn't collect this kind of information. This concept of bundling together all these different products that we have at GuideStar is very new for us. We have a new product manager, Kit Bletchworth, who's joined us last year, and a new product with our APIs, and we've done a lot of work to really help clarify the language that we have and how we talk about the various products and how we help our organizations and the nonprofit sector distribute this information. So I mentioned work in progress. So I don't yet have a slide for data innovation. The feedback loops and learning, these are very difficult things to measure. We're looking at, in terms of feedback, a more robust strategy to gather both peer feedback and beneficiary feedback. There's many other measures that we're looking at for feedback and learning, and we think that by the next impact call, we'll have some updates for you and a hypothesis on how we might measure those. Going back to an initial thing that I mentioned with regards to the complexity of GuideStar's work and how we're interconnected with other organizations, we also think it's important to provide context for the work that we're doing, and so with that, we're also going to be including some external sector metrics. So pulling some select metrics for the Money for Good research from Giving USA, just to provide people who look at our impact dashboard some additional context for understanding the sector and the work that we're doing. I'll close with saying that we're always looking to improve. We are iterating and welcome your feedback and questions. Thank you. I will hand it over to James.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about the financial results, to put the work that GuideStar does, the programmatic results and our theory of change into a financial context. If you could go to the next slide. The numbers that I'm going to be talking about today are preliminary 2014 results. They have not yet been audited, but our auditors will be coming in the next 2 weeks. And when that's done, we'll be filing our 990 in May, as well as producing our audited financial results. So everyone here is getting a preview of those results. Quick disclaimer, our historical results are not necessarily indicative of future results, and all forward-looking statements contain known and unknown risks that may result in future results that are materially different from historical results. Next slide. The first thing I wanted to cover is our top-line revenue and operating expense performance last year in 2014, and compare and contrast it with our performance in the last couple of years. You'll see here that revenue has been relatively consistent over the past couple of years, 2011 through 2013. We took a little bit of a slight dip in 2014 on the order of about $500,000. Most of it's mainly a question of our revenue mix. Most of it has remained fairly stable. Our product sales, which account for about 75% of our revenue, was off by about $100,000. And that was pretty much made up on the membership side, which normally accounts for about 12% of our revenue, which is up about $100,000. The shortfall is really a timing difference in our grant activity, about $500,000 difference there. And that was partially from new unrestricted grants coming in, and the bulk of the difference was in restricted grants that were released during the course of the year. We had less of that during the course of the year for special projects compared to in years past. Moving on to expenses, you will see that that has gone up and down over the last couple of years. In 2011, when we had strong negative cash flow, expenses were notably higher. In the last 2 years, we had brought them down significantly to increase cash flow. And this year, after affecting a pretty good turnaround the last 2 years, we decided to invest further in the business. And there you see the increase of about almost $1 million in 2014 as we invested principally in new personnel. Brought people in to fill in the spots that we had vacated from prior years when we were tightening our belts, as well as bringing in new blood to help us with, revamping our product strategy, revamping strategy in general, and bringing in new processes and systems to support the work that we do. You can move to the next slide. So the combination of relatively flat revenue and increasing expenses generates these cash flow and GAAP operating income charts. You'll see in 2011, when we had consistent revenue but high expenses, we had negative cash flow. We brought down expenses in 2012 and 13. We had positive cash flow and operating income. And this year, as we invested further into the business to continue our work going forwards, we have negative cash flow and negative operating income. If you can move to the next slide. So at the end of 2014, we have a weaker balance sheet than we had in years past. Cash ended the year at about $1.6 million, which is about 1.5 months worth of cash on the books. It's a significant decrease from 2013, where that should be sufficient for our operating needs. Where we're seeing the greatest weakness on our balance sheet right now is in unrestricted net assets. We had negative unrestricted net assets in years past, and we were able, through positive GAAP operating income, to bring it back to break even and net positive unrestricted net assets at the end of 2013. We've dipped below that again in 2014 because of our investments. But we see that the investments are starting to pay off after going through a good couple of months worth of learning curves. And we have optimism going into 2015, which I'll show you now when you see some of the top line results that we're expecting in 2015. Next slide. This is our financial outlook for 2015. We're expecting to see stronger revenue growth. We've had strong support in our transformational capital campaign in support of our GuideStar 2020 vision, most notably the $3 million grant that we had from Gates, the first payment of which we got in the fourth quarter of last year. We are seeing we're expecting almost double the amount of grants that we had in 2014 come in 2015, ones that we already have line of sight on. So we're pretty optimistic about that. We've also seen strong signs of growth in product sales at the end of 2014 have rolled into the first quarter of 2015. We're principally seeing 30%, 50% plus increases in some metrics such as site registrations and e-commerce conversions. And right now, so far, what we're getting traction on is on discrete products as opposed to across all products. We're hoping that as the work that we've invested into what we're doing on the site and the way we present our products, that those signs of growth are going to be sustainable across all of our products. And right now, we released a new membership program last year, and we're already seeing positive signs of growth, not only in 2014 when it was up 10%, but in 2015 as well. Meanwhile, expenses are going to continue to increase, but it's going to level off from the increases that we had in 2014. And bottom line is that cash flow and operating income should both turn positive this year and generate about $500,000 roughly in both cash flow and operating income, which will allow us to bring our balance sheet back into positive territory. And all this really is a byproduct of the fact that we're investing in our operations and investing in the work that we do to bring in more data for the sector. So we're very optimistic about next year. And I'd just like to say that we're glad that this is the 1-year anniversary of our impact calls. We think these is an interesting attempt to try and embody GuideStar's mission to bring greater transparency and accountability to the sector. We're glad you're here with us, and we welcome any questions that you have. With that, I'll turn it over to Jacob for lessons learned this year.
Thanks a lot, James. And, all of this is a reminder for us of the constant puzzle that we're navigating of how, as a mission-driven nonprofit organization, we ensure that we've got the financial capital in place at the right time to be able to support our costs. And to do that in a way that's sustainable in the long term. And I think we're navigating that. You see here that 2014 was an investment year, and it was an investment in GuideStar as an organization, but ultimately in our ability to meet our mission. And we're really starting to see the programmatic return on that investment, as well as the financial return to ensure that we're able to constantly grow, get better, get stronger, and be able to achieve our mission as well as humanly possible. So it's a tricky balance, one that I think that we're navigating relatively well, and 2015 on multiple fronts is looking very, very positive. As James said, we're seeing that both on the earned revenue side and then, importantly, from our foundation partners as well. So when looking back on 2014, it's worth mentioning, most things went pretty well, but there are certainly things that were challenges. One of the things that was best about 2014 is a number of the partnerships that we've had. We've talked about some of them already on the call: the Overhead Myth, Charting Impact, the Bridge Project, the Simplify Initiative with Technology Affinity Group, not to mention the diversity reporting project we've done with D5 as well as Green 2.0. But one lesson that we really learned in 2014 is that these partnerships are absolutely worth it, and they are a ton of work. A true partnership, and we know this intuitively, but you sometimes have to learn some of these lessons over and over again. They just take a lot of time, and it's an investment not just of time, but also of your emotional energy, because when you're co-creating something with someone, you have to navigate a sense of shared investment and shared ownership. And so, we ended 2014 really pleased with the progress on our partnerships, but also very cognizant of the costs of those partnerships. And going into 2015, we're launching more partnerships because we know how important they are for the field, especially given GuideStar's role as a platform that helps to weave together activity across so many different aspects of the nonprofit sector. But we leave very cognizant of those the burden of partnership. It's a burden we're happy to take on, but that we're very aware of. Going more broadly, going into 2015, with the dynamic data visualization that I showed you that laid out how GuideStar is a network of individuals within the organization, worked on a set of goals, 5 goals in 2015 that had a series of in 2014 that had a series of sub-goals. In 2015, there's a similar set of goals, which I'll just go over quickly right now. So first is to continue to drive up the quality of our products, the tools that we offer the sector to help advance our mission. Second is to really ramp up our data collection. I noted the launch of GuideStar Exchange Platinum for quantitative programmatic data. Thirdly, to really deepen engagement with stakeholders, and we'll have some announcements on that coming soon. Fourth, to make sure that we have the financial strength to fuel that innovation and continued growth of the organization. And then finally, internally, to make sure that we have a data-driven learning culture within GuideStar that allows us to keep getting better. Now, under these 5 broader goals, we have 20 sub-goals, each of which has a quantitative metric. some of which we'll share in the future, as Ms. said, as we continue to evolve our internal measurement systems. But going into 2015, more broadly, I just see 2015 as a year where a lot of the investments we made in 2014, 2013 as well, are going to really start bearing fruit, not just for us, but for the field. And those of you on the call will start to see in our tools how those investments are really paying off. And so that's something that makes 2015 especially exciting, because the changes that we see internally start to become manifest externally. So with that, we're going to move on to the Q&A section. And I thank you all for listening to us, and now it's your chance to speak. And so I will ask Lindsay to share what some of the questions are.
You bet. So we have a ton already. A couple I just wanted to address right away. The slides will be available for download. We're going to email each person who registered with a link to the presentation, with a live recording, and then you can also find it on our website in a few days. And that short link is npo.gs/webinararchives.gs. So you can actually see that on your computer right now. So let's get into the questions. How has the field reacted so far to the collaboration with D5, and are organizations voluntarily providing demographic data to the GuideStar Exchange?
Great. So I'll take this. I'll take this question. So we launched a new tool as part of the GuideStar Exchange that collects data on nonprofit staff, boards, and volunteers across a number of different axes: race, sex, sexual orientation, disability status. And as Ms. said, we've already seen some terrific uptake on this. More than 800 organizations have already voluntarily shared that data. I will emphasize the word voluntary. Right now, this is entirely voluntary for those organizations that want to share this kind of information. It's not a requirement for any of the participation levels within GuideStar Exchange. But broadly, I think we all know that the diversity of the people within the nonprofit sector is an important driver of the effectiveness of the nonprofit sector. One place where we've seen this conversation play out in particular is within the environmental movement. And we've had a close partnership with an organization called Green 2.0 that's looking at the diversity of the environmental movement. And I think environmental organizations are particularly aware of the fact that environmental degradation affects everyone, and that environmental organizations need to reflect the diversity of the communities they serve if they're going to be able to effectively engage with advancing an environmental agenda that serves that entire diversity. So it's an essential question, but it's a tricky one. Human society has struggled with questions of diversity, throughout its history on many levels, and will continue to. These are not simple problems. They are fraught with history and with some of the realities of inequality that we face right now. But we believe that there is an essential opportunity for GuideStar to help just share the facts and then allow the conversations that we have about how to address diversity within the field to be based on facts. And that hopefully that can ground them and make them more productive. And so this is a long process, but it's one where we're really pleased with the initial progress. We've got a long way to go, but we think it's a conversation the sector is going to continue to have and needs to continue to have as we evolve as a field.
Great. Questions are pouring in, so this is very exciting. Is there or will there be a template on how to and what effectiveness information we should use, similar for financial information? And this person just remarked, it would be great to display in a standard format for donors to easily digest.
Yeah. So, the short answer is yes. We're going to have a whole series of tools to help people do this. Most importantly, we're putting a lot of thought into the data collection tool for GuideStar Exchange Platinum, for the way that we create a web interface for nonprofits to share this kind of data. And we think this requires a lot of thought to do well, because these are hard questions. And the field has never, and it's remarkable to think about this, has never had a tool to bring together this kind of data in a systematic way. This is the first. And we have to keep in mind that we have to create a tool that works as well for an environmental advocacy group as it does for an opera house or a homeless shelter or a think tank. Very different kinds of organizations doing very, very different kinds of work. So we can't create a one-size-fits-all solution, or certainly not any single metrics that everyone should measure. That's the problem with the overhead myth. It assumes that all nonprofits are the same and can be measured in the same way. That said, I do think that there will be certain characteristics of those metrics that nonprofits share that will indicate that they're good metrics. So one of them is, does the nonprofit have a deep sense of ownership of this metric? When a funder says to a nonprofit, hey, you should measure this thing, all too often the nonprofit doesn't feel a sense of ownership of that metric. They measure it only for the funder. But the reason we want to be engaged in smart measurement in the field is so we can get better and understand the impact that we're making, or sometimes not making. So that sense of ownership is extremely important. The next characteristic I'd say is, do organizations not just have a sense of ownership, but do they actually use this metric to help their work get better? Do they talk about it in their meetings in a way that actually changes their behavior? Does it get reported to the board? And does the board pay attention to it? And then thirdly, I'd say that most of you on the call will be familiar with the difference between activities, outputs, and outcomes. But I'll just repeat it briefly. That think about a job training program. The activity might be that you hold a job training course. The output might be the number of people who complete that course. But the outcome is the number of people who complete that course, get a job, and keep it for, say, a year. So a third characteristic of good metrics, I believe, will be that they're more outcomes and not as much activities and outputs. Now, that said, we also are going to embrace all of those, because if you want to run an effective program, you do need to track your activities and outputs. Those numbers are good. They're important. We would love to get them and share them, and we would welcome them on for any organization that doesn't yet know how to track outcomes. But over time, we hope that as a field, we can shift towards an appropriate balance where we have that operational sense of what we're doing, but we also have an evaluative sense of what we're accomplishing.
Great. There are so many questions now that are kind of echoing each other, so I'm going to try to group them together. There are quite a few about transformational capital campaign. What is it? Can we talk about our components? Why do we do it? One remark someone had is, this seems like a great term for identifying how a nonprofit is reinvesting in itself.
I think that's right. I'll offer a few thoughts, and then if Ms. or James or others have anything they want to add, they should. We recognize that if we're going to reinvest in ourselves, first we need to understand why we're reinventing ourselves. I hope that we've been able to articulate that when talking through our theory of change. But it does turn out to take some money to do that. And we have some earned income, but not enough to be able to make the investments we really, really want to make. And so our calculations have shown that over about a 3-year period, we need about $10 million to be able to create the transformation that we think is necessary for GuideStar, but also for the field as a whole. I'm glad to say that we're starting to make some real progress towards that $10 million goal. We really only have $3 million fully secured, and we've already talked about this grant from the Gates Foundation, and Victoria Vrana from Gates was on the last impact call to talk about why the Gates Foundation made that investment. And so we're looking for that second really big investment. But we do have a number of conversations in play right now that add up to several $1 million. So I believe that we will achieve this goal. It might take slightly longer than we'd hoped. In fact, it's already taken longer than we'd hoped. But the signs are very positive. We've got to kind of seal the deal, but right now it looks like that will happen. And our hope is in the next impact call, or perhaps the one after that, we'll be able to report back to all of you on the next parts of that transformational capital coming in and securing our path towards this broader vision. Ms. James, anyone else want to add anything there?
Yes, James, I'll add a couple of things. I think that the work that GuideStar does is obviously very important. Or I certainly hope that everybody believes that the work that we do is very important. And we're, just like most other nonprofits, we're a nonprofit, and therefore the difference between what we earn in revenue or grants and what we spend in expenses are pretty much very, very, very close. And if you want to grow, if you want to transform, if you want to change, if you want to invest, then you're going to need to come up with some excess cash in order to be able to do that. And that can either be generated organically from your operations or it can come from outside sources. And that can be very difficult for a nonprofit to do. And I think it's not unique to GuideStar. I think it's something that it's a problem for the nonprofit sector overall, is how do we as nonprofits find that extra money in order to invest in things other than just continuing our operations and building on it incrementally. Incrementally doesn't really bring transformational change, and that's why we have this transformational capital campaign. It'd be nice if all of us, if we could find the transformational capital campaign easier to do, and it would be great if the entire sector could find that kind of transformational capital available.
That's great. So a couple people had questions about the tools we're using to provide this information on the presentation today. So tools to track progress to our strategic plan and the data visualization. What tool do we use for that? I think a lot of nonprofits are interested in doing that for themselves, it sounds like.
I'll speak on the first and might need to check on the second with regards to the data visualization. Right now, our data collection on the impact dashboard and for our organizational dashboard is pretty much done manually in Excel. So, Carson Saunders, our director of business intelligence, is focused on kind of streamlining that process, making it more easier for different departments to have their underlying dashboards that report into or pull from underlying departmental dashboards to pull into this overall organizational dashboard. But right now, it's pretty much a pretty manual process that we're going around on a monthly basis and collecting the data from lots of different sources. So from Google Analytics, from Mixpanel, information from our CRM system, lots of different sources of information to track both organizational data as well as impact data.
And yeah, on the second one, I'm not sure what tool Sarah Madden, our head of design, used to build that data visualization. We can try and find that out and share that with everyone.
And this is Lily. So I can try to email those that ask that question and send you a note that describes that tool, because it's been making waves internally. So it's exciting it's making waves externally as well. Great. So some questions about how we measure things. How do we measure, not GuideStar, how do we measure nonprofit efficiency and effectiveness? And what kind of progress have we made towards the overhead myth, ending the overhead myth?
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
So, so GuideStar itself, we don't do ratings, right? We share data. Many other people will use our data to make a judgment, and we are excited about that because we think you have to make judgments to operate effectively. But we're not ourselves doing any ratings. That said, there are implicit choices in how we collect and share data that indicate what we think is important. So, for example, we do think that having strong governance is important for nonprofits. That's why we partnered with BoardSource to add a set of questions around governance. We believe that tracking quantitatively your programmatic results, whether activities, outputs, or outcomes, is important. That's why we're launching GuideStar Exchange Platinum. We believe that having a smart, sophisticated understanding of your organization's finances is important. That's why we partnered with Nonprofit Finance Fund to create the Financial Scan product. That's a much more sophisticated look at nonprofit finances than what we would see as an oversimplification like the overhead ratio. So there's a broad trend here, which is it's complicated, and so let's be honest about it being complicated, and let's look at the many aspects of nonprofit performance. But let's also bring all that complexity together through smart data visualization, graphic design, new tools, so that users can see those different elements at once. and can see those different angles on understanding a nonprofit. And we're in the midst of doing exactly that. You've seen some progress, but we've got a ways still to go. And in terms of the overhead myth itself, we've had incredibly strong support for that. Well over 100 articles and blog posts, many invitations to speak at conferences and talk about it. My colleagues at Better Business Bureau Wise Giving Alliance and Charity Navigator got a standing ovation about the overhead myth. And yeah, we clearly have a long way to go. Have we seen a major shift in donor behavior yet? No, we haven't. But have we seen a shift in the conversation? I think so. And perhaps the best sign is that there are now a lot of other related campaigns. One was recently launched in California. There are a number of large, big brand name nonprofits that are getting together this spring to talk through how they may be able to advance this conversation. So it's not about us anymore. We are one of many voices on this campaign. We're proud of the role we've taken to help nudge this conversation along, but we also are glad to know that we're not alone. So we've got a long way to go. The most important single thing that nonprofits can do, we believe, is to offer an alternative, to show their donors, here's something else you can look at instead of overhead. And GuideStar Exchange Platinum is going to offer a channel for nonprofits to do just that. One other thing before we go into the next call, we've now heard from our head of design about the data visualization. She used, so I'm just going to quote from a message from her. For the network visualization, I used a combination of CSV export of the data to plug into network graphing software called Gelfi, G-E-P-H-I. It's a free online graph network software, SVG, and vanilla JavaScript to design and build it.
So if you understood that.
So for those of you who are technical on the call, you will know what Sarah is talking about there. But I think the key thing there is for the graph network software is Gephi, G-E-P-H-I.
And it just sounds like there are great data viz tools out there. And it sounds like this is kind of where nonprofits are going. So that's exciting. And while we're on that topic, what are some macro trends in the industry that you think you'll see in the next 10 years, and how might that affect GuideStar's mission and the role we play in the industry? And I do just want to flag, we've got about 10 minutes left, so probably 3 or 4 more questions.
Okay. So, I'll offer a couple thoughts here and welcome any from anyone else. The world is changing so fast that predicting anything 10 years out is now a fool's errand. But what we can do is look at, some broader directional trends. I think most of them will be quite familiar to people. The rapid expansion of technology to every aspect of our lives. The deep integration across different tools and platforms, the emergence of mobile, the broader trends of globalization and the interconnection of the global economy, shifts in demographics, and generational shifts in expectations that people have for the companies and nonprofits that they work with. And also a broad recognition of the very serious problems that we face as a species and a society, and the need for a strong nonprofit sector to help address those. So all of those are broad trends that are external to GuideStar, but ones that we're trying to pay attention to, and ones that I think justify and in some cases accelerate the basic strategy that we've laid out. And I think every nonprofit has to figure out, to what degree do you really pay attention to those grand trends and think in the really long term, and to what degree do you have to just struggle every day to get the stuff done that you got to get done today. And in fact, this week, many members of the GuideStar team are here in San Francisco for planning and to really step back and to think in the long term before we go back to then really trying to execute on a day-to-day basis, but to do so in a way that's in the context of these longer-term trends that are important for all of us to pay attention to.
Great. So some questions about our products. One said, can you tell us a little bit more about GuideStar's APIs? And one is, what are the products that result in sales and revenue for GuideStar?
Great. Let me hand this over to Evan Paul, our Vice President of Products.
Hi, everybody. This is my first time talking on a call, on the Impact call, so it's nice to meet you all. So we basically have three different types of products. So we have a suite of products that you can access directly through GuideStar.org. So that's our various tiers of search, so premium search and pro search, our financial scan tool, and then kind of standalone products like our compensation report. So those are products you'll access directly through our site. Then the other two categories of products, one we call our software as a service products. So the flagship of those is our Donor Edge platform. There are 16 community foundations around the country that basically leverage the technology and data of GuideStar on their websites to power their own search functionality, nonprofit profile functionality, as well as data collection. So they're collecting a whole set of fields that are in the GuideStar Exchange, as well as additional fields that are relevant for that community. So that's an example of our software as a service or SaaS products. And then last year we rolled out our APIs. So the way to think about those are they're basically straight data feeds, and they're organized in a variety of different ways. There's a search API that enables quick querying of our entire database to find the record you're looking for. And then there is an Exchange API that pulls profile data from the GuideStar Exchange into a variety of different applications. Grants management software is one of those that was mentioned. And then we have a Detail API, which is basically every piece of data we have on every organization in our database. And that then can get pulled into various applications. And then we have a Charity Check API, which is the real-time validation on the status of a nonprofit with the IRS to make sure that they are a legit organization for donation. So a lot of donation platforms use that to make sure that there are no fraudulent transactions happening and to make sure that the organization is on file. So those are that's an overview of all the different products we're offering. I just say, given my moment on the sandbox or soapbox, the overall direction we are trying to take our products to is that they are really enabling better nonprofit management and performance, as well as better and smarter donation decisions. So harkening back to our theory of change, we're really trying to do a much, much better job in the design, messaging, pricing across the board to make them much, much more useful and powerful for the field. So by all means, if there are ways that you think we could be doing that better, let us know. We're going to be rolling out some functionality this year to enable, to solicit more direct feedback around our features and functionality from our users and customers. So we welcome and really want that feedback because we really want these tools to enable people to do better work for the world. Thanks.
Excellent.
Great. So we have a few questions about Platinum. So, when is it going to launch? One person had a question along the lines of, charting impact reports aren't data and it's not backed up by measurable results. So how can we get measurable results? So can you just kind of talk about Platinum in general?
Yeah. Let me answer the second piece. So I would argue that the charting impact questions, which is the gold level of GuideStar Exchange, which are sentences as opposed to numbers, absolutely are data. And my wife is a physician and an anthropologist, and in anthropology they talk about ethnography as a kind of data collection, where you go out and you spend a lot of time with people and you gather stories and impressions and interviews. That's absolutely data. Just as highly quantitative hard numbers are data. They're just different kinds of data that serve different purposes. We like to say no stories without numbers and no numbers without stories. Both of these are essential to explain the complex work of the nonprofit sector. But there are certain kinds of things you can only do with numbers. You can really only benchmark with numbers, and it's a lot easier to do longitudinal analysis when you have numbers. And that's why we think it's so important to bring in this Platinum tool to begin to gather the quantitative programmatic data. But it all has to be in partnership with the more ethnographic sentence or word data that tells that sort of richer story of what's happening, not just behind the scenes, but kind of beneath the activity of nonprofits. It's an interesting challenge for us from a data visualization standpoint and a graphic design and user interface standpoint. But how do we show the numbers and the words together? And it's something that we're going to continue tinkering with for a long time, I'm sure, as we try and get that balance right. We do not have a launch date for Platinum. I'll let Evan offer whatever framing he wants to in terms of the timing on that.
Sure. So we're really focused right now on getting Platinum right more than we are getting it fast. So we're doing a lot of work right now to compile example programmatic metrics so that a lot of organizations can have a starting point that they could use or not use, but at least helps them orient the kinds of information that may be useful, again, measuring actions, outputs, and outcomes. So we're doing a lot of work by different segments of the nonprofit community, arts and culture, in partnership with a cultural data project, environment, et cetera, to review those and to make sure that those are leading great examples of programmatic metrics. And then we're doing a lot of work on the user experience side to make the 1,500 to 2,000 metrics digestible and enable people to have a pretty focused and curated experience depending on your organization's profile, so you just see information most relevant to you. And so we're going to be iterating and prototyping and using some user testing to get that interface right, so the reporting burden is as light as possible. So that's the work we're involved in right now. It's going to take some time to get that right, so I would have to say in the coming months. But everybody laughs because they know I'm a little averse to hard deadlines when developing really complex technology. So that's what I think we can say right now.
That's great. So I think that's all the time we have today. We just want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join us. If we didn't get to your question, I'm going to see if we can group them together and do a blog post. It'll probably be a co-authored blog post with answers from a few people. I want to thank Jacob, Ms., James, and Evan for participating today. And please watch out for an email. It'll be coming soon, again, with the presentation and a recording of the discussion. We'd love to have you go ahead and register for our next Impact Call, which is May 11th. That website is npo.gs/impactcall6, and you will be looking at, or we'll be talking about Q1 results at that point. So again, thanks for being with us, and have a great day.